file you asked for, Mr. Roach?
Yes, that's it. Thank you very much. Clay in the Service of Sanitation is a short film about the production of Royal Doulton sanitary pottery. Sanitary pottery is usually thought of as one material, but in fact there are three distinct kinds. The Royal Doulton potteries produce all three. Firstly, there is sanitary earthenware, which is used primarily in the domestic field. It is a fine material of exceptionally attractive appearance. Next, there is Vitreous China, which has the same excellent appearance as earthenware, but is heavier and stronger. Moreover, as the name implies, it is non-porous throughout, and therefore does not depend upon the glaze for its sanitary qualities. Lastly, there is Sanitary Fire Clay ware, which is much heavier than either sanitary earthenware or Vitreous China. It is extremely strong and durable, and lends itself to the production of much larger articles than can be made in either of the other two materials. We make sanitary fire clay ware at our Dudley works. Sanitary earthenware and Vitreous China are made at our Stoke works, where the output has now been increased very considerably by the completion of a large new production unit. Starting from the production of the original plaster models, which is the first stage in the manufacture of all three types of ware, you will now see the various processes which ultimately lead to the finished articles.
The modelling shop plays a most important part in the production of sanitary pottery. Here, the modeller produces the original plaster model, which is retained during the whole lifetime of the pattern, and is the prototype from which all future working models and moulds are made. Having drawn a plan of the proposed article, in this case a lavatory basin, on a large flat surface, the modeller proceeds to build up the model stage by stage. The inverted bowl is placed in position on the plan. The soap sinkings are added. Later, plaster of Paris is poured over the model. The liquid plaster is first skillfully distributed around the bowl, and as it slowly solidifies, it is fashioned and shaped by hand. When set, the resulting plaster model gives the face of the basin. It is trimmed and finished off before the details of the back part of the basin are modelled onto it. The underneath of the basin is produced in the same way. The modeller must allow for the considerable shrinkage of the ware during the drying and firing, and for the metal fittings which will later be attached. From the original model, working models and moulds are made in plaster. The plaster is mixed and blended by electric mixers. It takes several minutes for the blending process to take place, during which time the vortex around the shaft of the mixer gradually diminishes in size. When the vortex has completely disappeared, the plaster is ready for pouring into the moulds. Each mould, consisting of 2 or more pieces, is used only a limited number of times to ensure faultless reproduction of the design. In varying proportions, there are 3 basic ingredients common to both sanitary earthenware and Vitreous China: selected china clays from Cornwall, plastic ball clays from Devon and Dorset, and flint from the seashore. Cornish china stone is an additional important constituent of earthenware, while feldspar is an essential ingredient in vitreous china. After being reduced to the necessary degree of fineness, each material is mixed separately with water in a series of machines known as plungers. The liquids in their correct proportions are run off along channels into underground tanks, where they are thoroughly mixed together. The combined liquid, known as slip, is forced by pumps through a series of fine mesh sieving screens and then over electromagnets to remove any particles of iron, the presence of which would discolor the ware. The slip flows into storage tanks where it is kept constantly in motion. Next, it is pumped through large filter presses, divided into sections by fine mesh cloths, which retain the clay while surplus water is forced out. The thin sheets of now blended material are removed and fed into another mixing arc in which they are transformed once more into liquid form of just the right consistency for casting by adding certain chemicals. The slips for sanitary earthenware and vitreous china are prepared separately, but the method is similar. For fire clay ware, on the other hand, different types of refractory fire clays, plastic clays and other ingredients, including a certain amount of already fired clay known as grog, are crushed, ground and sieved separately in a dry state. These are then mixed with water in the proper proportions to produce a heavy slip of porridge-like consistency. The slip is run off into large buckets, from which the molds for fire clay sinks, factory ablution fountains and other products are filled by hand. Earthenware and vitreous china slips, being more fluid than fire clay, are usually pumped through pipes to the casting shops. After the molds have been filled, the plaster absorbs water from the slip, leaving a layer of clay adhering to the inner mold surfaces. When this layer is sufficiently thick, the surplus slip is run off. After an interval, to allow the clay shape to dry sufficiently to be handled without risk of damage, the molds are removed. First, the bottom half is lifted off. The holes for the metal fittings are cleaned and trimmed. The overflow connection to the waste outlet is fitted. As the clay shape is still not strong enough to support its own weight, the bottom of the mold must be refitted before it can be turned over and the top half of the mold removed for the final cleaning and trimming. Earthenware and vitreous china, unlike fire clay ware, are fired twice. Their first firing takes place before glazing. After drying, the ware is conveyed from the casting shops to the large gas-fired continuous kiln. This first firing is termed biscuit firing. With the help of fireproof pillars and slabs, the ware is carefully arranged on trucks. Each hour, a new truck is moved into the entrance of the kiln, which is divided into various zones, in which the temperature rises gradually to a peak of intense heat and then gradually falls again. The progress of each truck through the oven is recorded automatically, and the temperature cycle checked at each stage. Finally, after many hours of firing, the ware, now known as biscuit ware, emerges at the other end of the kiln. After biscuit firing, the ware is carefully inspected for any defects before it goes on to be glazed and fired a second time. The Royal Doulton badge is applied from a paper transfer which bears the imprint in heat-resisting ceramic pigment. After yet another inspection comes the glazing process. The glazing of earthenware and vitreous china is done by two methods, spraying or dipping, according to the design and color of the article. The glaze itself is a liquid of glass-like composition, which will be transformed by the second or glossed firing into an impermeable and even coating, either in white or one of a range of pleasing colors. The glaze is dried by passing the ware through a tunnel-type dryer. The ware is again checked, and any slight irregularities in the glaze are cleaned off before it is arranged on trucks once more to undergo the second firing in a continuous gas-fired tunnel kiln, very similar to the biscuit kiln that we've already seen. The processes of glazing and firing earthenware and vitreous china are similar. You will recall, however, that fire clay ware is fired once only. After having been removed from the molds, smoothed and finished, it is ready for glazing. Firstly, several coats of engobe, which is a special preparation of white firing clay, are brushed on and then rubbed down by hand to give a smooth, even surface. After the engobe has dried, several coats of glaze are applied, again by brushing. There is much greater variety in the shapes and sizes of fire clay ware than exists in other sanitary pottery materials. This means that, generally speaking, it is easier to fire it in intermittent kilns. These allow more latitude in utilizing space than standard-sized trucks, which have to pass through a tunnel kiln of uniform cross-section. Setting ware in an intermittent kiln calls for great skill and ingenuity on the part of the kiln men, especially as the tiers rise nearer and nearer the crown of the kiln. When the kiln has been filled to capacity, the entrance is bricked up and cemented and fires lit round the base. Although various scientific devices are used for recording the temperature during all stages of firing, a great deal still depends on the experience and judgment of the kiln man. After firing, the kiln is allowed to cool slowly over a period of several days. When it is sufficiently cool, the ware is removed. After the single firing of fire clay ware and the double firing of the other two products, each piece is again carefully inspected. Then come a variety of further processes. The backs of basins, for example, are ground to ensure an absolutely level surface for fixing. Certain fire clay articles are trimmed and masoned by hand. A remarkable tribute, this, to the strength of the material. Others are cut to exact size and shape by carborundum circular saws. Internal fittings for cisterns and tanks are assembled and tested.
And so the finished articles reach the warehouses, ready for dispatch to destinations throughout the world, where they will be installed in homes, in factories, in laboratories, in hospitals, in schools, in fact, in all types of buildings. Modern sanitary science, upon which the health and well-being of countless millions depend, would scarcely have achieved its present high standards but for the numerous products which the age-old craft of the potter has been able to place at its disposal. The Royal Doulton potteries are justly proud of the part they have been privileged to play in these developments.